What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo from Pitchfork Academy here, and in this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial I'm going to show you how to create an intro cinematic or cutscene that smoothly transitions into gameplay, such as you may have seen in games like God of War and other heavily cinematic titles that are very immersive. So if I hit play here, we've got this intro cinematic where our character walks out. He does a little nifty animation, and then we will smoothly transition into gameplay and be able to start playing our game. It's super easy to set up. But just before we get started, guys, if you like what we do here at Pitchfork Academy, the #1 way to support our channel is by picking up our new game, Skyblocker, which we've just released on Steam. It's a fun little 3D arcade puzzle game where you stack blocks as high as you can while battling the elements and gravity to try and earn your place on the global online leaderboards. It's just $10 and we think it's a great little game. But without further ado, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, now I'm here in my base project, and all I've done in this project is I've added this kind of doorway in the back wall here, which if I hide this wall, you'll see has this, dark room behind it. And that's because I'm just going to do my little intro cinematic of my character walking out through this doorway into the room here, and then maybe do a fun little animation. So I've got this animation which I pulled from Project Megasample, which, by the way, if you haven't seen already, I uploaded a video with links to Project Megasample, which contains about 1,800 free animation assets, most of which are directly from Epic Games themselves, and I'll link that video in a card up the top right now. So I've got this finger guns animation, and actually the first thing I'm going to do is just edit this animation, because as you can see at the end here, he goes into a kind of pistol stance, and I'm just going to transition to an idle stance. So I'm just going to, when he starts to settle into an idle pose here, I'm just going to right click here and remove all the frames after this point here so that the animation ends right there. Nice, I'll save and close that. And now let's get started creating our little intro cinematic. Now this is going to be a fairly basic method. There are more advanced methods for some of the things I'm going to show you today, but I thought I'd just keep it simple as a nice little intro. And it's the easiest and fastest way to get to a nice smooth transition from this cutscene into gameplay. So actually the first thing I'm going to do is just delete the player start, and then I'm going to find my character, which is in third person and blueprints, BP third person character, and I'm going to drag that out into my level. And I am also going to, with this character selected, search in the details panel for possess, and auto possess player here I'm going to change to player 0. So the first player controller to connect will automatically possess this character. I will then create a level sequence to animate this character. So we will up here drop this down and add a level sequence. You can call this whatever you want and store it wherever you want. I'm just going to leave it as default and save. And I don't need this sequencer curves window, but I will need this sequencer tab right here, which should automatically open when you create a level sequence. And you'll see that your new level sequence is here in the level. So this can go anywhere. I'm just going to keep it right here. You obviously can't see this during gameplay, but we will need this level sequence from the outliner here in a moment. The next thing I'm going to do is add my required actors to my sequencer. So I can select my third person character here and find him in the outliner, the world outliner up here, and just drag him into the sequencer window right here, and he will be added to sequencer. And if it's the UE5 Many or any other character that has a control rig assigned to it, it might bring up the control rig by default, but we're not going to use the control rig. We're going to click on the control rig here and hit delete and get rid of that, because we are just going to add some animations straight to this character right here. I also will not need this animations tab right here, so I'm going to close that. And I'll also add a camera to my sequence. Now, you could add a Cinecam, which has a lot more sort of options than a standard camera actor. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to use just a normal camera actor because it will be much easier to blend smoothly into gameplay as opposed to creating a Cinecam and then trying to set it up to look more like one of these standard cameras that you have on your character. So you can do that, but I am just going to click the cube plus icon here and search for camera, and a camera actor right here. I'm just going to drag out into the level right here where my level sequence is right here. And then I'll also find this camera in the outliner and drag it into sequencer. And it will, as you can see here, automatically possess that camera. And that is useful because we can sort of see where we want the camera to be for our cinematic as we keyframe it. But if you don't want to possess the camera, you can just click this little button right here and it will unpossess the camera, and then you'll see it right there. And anytime you want to possess it, you can just click that again, and then you're possessing that camera. Nice. Now, before we move on, we do want to change a setting or two in the camera actor right here. We can go to the details panel right here, and you'll see the camera settings right here. But what I'm actually going to do is browse to my character. So I'm going to click the character, Control B to browse, and open up this character. And then I'll select the follow camera, and over here on the camera settings, I will right click and copy all properties in category. And then I'll go back to sequencer, I'll select the camera actor, and then I'll right click on camera settings and paste all properties in category. Actually, those are already the same. So what I was actually hoping to change is the camera options. So let's see if this will actually work here. Camera options, copy all properties in category, and then I'll paste that into the camera options. And that has cleared the, for example, constrain aspect ratio, which gives you those black bars at the top and bottom. So that may have been the only thing that was different, but it doesn't hurt to just copy the settings from your camera so that you can more smoothly transition into gameplay. But the main thing is that you uncheck constrain aspect ratio here. Okay, let's start by keyframing our character's movement and animating our character with what we want him to do in the sequence. So I am going to first move him back into this sort of dark room back here because I want him to walk out. And then I am going to hit the plus right here on my third person character in sequencer, and I'm going to add a transform track. So this allows us to keyframe the transform of this character. 30 frames per second is fine. I'm going to make sure that the time here is on the first frame at 0000, and I'm going to click this little plus icon here to keyframe his transform there at this point in time. I'm also going to click this little icon here, which, as you can see, it says automatically adds a key when there's already a track and at least one key. So this means that we've got a transform track here and a key. And if we activate this and then we move the timeline here, and I'm going to move it up to, about 120 frames, which is 4 seconds. And then I'm going to start moving my character. And if you watch carefully on sequencer, when I let go here and I've moved him, it will automatically add a keyframe there. So that has automatically keyframed that movement like so. You can see the camera boom is colliding with the wall, even though I've cut a hole in the wall there. But don't worry too much about that. We're not going to be possessing the camera until this sort of cinematic sequence is over anyway. But actually, I do want to move him out so that the camera is out past the wall there. Nice. The next thing I'm going to do is add an animation to this movement. So I'll take it back to frame 0 here, and then on my third person character, I'll hit the plus icon and animation, and then I can search for walk, and I'll add the walk forward from the third person template, And I'll also drag this animation out so it extends all the way to this keyframe over here. And now when he comes out, he will be walking. Nice. But you'll see that when he stops here, he's still kind of walking, and then he just kind of boom, into an idle pose. So what we can do here is blend this animation out. If you hover over the animation, you'll see these little yellow triangles in the top left and the top right, and you can grab these and drag them out, and you can blend out the animation so that he smooths off here as if he's stopping. And I might just play with that blend a little bit, maybe shorten it to try and make it a little less jarring so that he just blends into the idle pose like so. And you can do the same with your start if you can see him during the start. And what I might actually do is just hide this wall for a moment so that we can see him starting to walk over here. And you'll see again, he's sort of starting the animation and he's barely started moving, so it doesn't look very smooth. And I found that for sort of beginning movement, a longer blend seems to work more nicely. So you want to fiddle with this blend time so that his feet aren't sliding too much. I think even a longer blend might be good. No, too long. Let's try a short one. So that's just something you want to play with here to try and smooth it out and make it look natural. That needs a little bit more work, but we're not going to see this character when he starts moving anyway, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. The next thing I want him to do is my fun little finger guns animation when he stops walking here. And we might be able to overlap these animations and blend them together. Let's see what we can do here. I might just extend this timeline a little bit so I can see a bit more. And this red line, by the way, is where the animation sequence will end. So I'm just going to put it out here for now. We'll set it once we're done animating everything. So I'm going to click the plus icon again and animation. And I'm going to search for my finger guns animation sequence, and I'm going to add that in. And then we've got his little finger guns animation. Nice. I'm going to need to extend this even more. That animation is a bit longer than I expected. And we're going to have to blend this. So I'm going to drag this out, and yeah, that should blend pretty nicely into the idle animation. Actually, that's pretty smooth. I didn't realize that he had a sort of weapon pose at the start here, which makes sense, but I might actually just edit that animation again. So I'll go back to the start here and check what he's doing at the start. Oh, yep, he's in a weapons pose. I'm going to just start it from about here where his arms are a bit further down. So I'll right click here, remove the frames from 0 to 6. And then it will start right here. Nice. I'll save and close that. And I don't actually know if that will be reflected. Yep, that's been reflected in there, but obviously that's a little bit jarring there. We need to smooth this out. And that's pretty smooth. He comes to a stop, and then he starts doing his little finger guns dance. Let's actually make these overlap a little bit and see if it looks any better. So this is... You can play with this, you can sort of overlap the animations, blend one out while you're blending the other one in, and let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's pretty smooth. Nice. And then he goes into the idle. Nice. Okay, the next thing we'll do is we'll sort of bring this camera in and we'll make a nice transition into gameplay. But actually, before we do that, we want to make sure that on our transform here, for our character, that we actually right click on the transform track and go to properties, and when finished, change this to keep state, and that'll make sure that our player character stays there at the end of the sequence. Nice. Okay, let's have a look at the camera actor. So we have actually been piloting the camera actor, I believe. I'll just double check that I am piloting the camera actor. Nice. And let's start this off somewhere like here. Nice. Don't forget to like and subscribe. and I will add a keyframe for the transform there on the camera, and then let's think about where we want this camera to move. We can start to maybe come in a little bit on our character, and because we've got this that has automatically keyframed as long as you change the time, let's come in. Nice. And let's do a little revolve around him while he does this. So I'm going to then bring it over to here, and I might just get a bit more real estate here. And I'm not actually loving that move with the camera, so I might just remove the keyframe from the middle there and go straight into that second keyframe so that it comes forward. And I'll move this back a little bit so that we'll come in and sweep around. And then he's doing his little finger guns. And we will gradually revolve around here until we get into the camera position of the player character here. And I'm going to get this as close as I can, but we're going to fine tune this in a moment. There's a little jump there. We've got, I think, maybe 2 keyframes here going on. I don't know what's going on there, but I'll actually delete that keyframe. I think I had 2 keyframes there. So I'll just set this one again, like so, and that should smooth out. Nice. Pretty cool. The next thing I want to do is just double check this camera position. What I might do is make this end, so that's about frame 270. I will just go a little bit further than 270 here, and I'll drag out the camera cut right here, and I'm going to drag it all the way to the end here, and then I'm going to right click on the camera cuts, and I'm going to check this can blend, and that means that this camera will blend into the camera of our character. So I'll check this can blend, and that brings up these little yellow triangles so that you can put a blend curve in. And I'll just blend from sort of the end of the animation here. So this is where the camera sort of comes into place, and then it will blend in. So instead of sort of blending in before, which might be a little bit jarring, I'm going to have the camera come into place and then start to blend in with the character's camera. Let's just uncheck this. I actually moved the camera around there while I'm piloting it, which I should not have done. I will uncheck this so that I'm not piloting anymore, and then we can see the difference between the camera in our sequence and the camera on the character's blueprint. So we can select the camera here, and we can sort of more finely tune its position so that it is exactly on top of the player camera. And even when you get it exactly on top, you'll still see a slight moment there where you'll be able to tell that it's blending, but you know, we'll get it as close as we can. So because I was piloting this, the rotation is not going to be perfect, so I'm going to 0 the rotation there. I'm also going to make this rotation here just -180, so it's exactly the same rotation. And I'll turn off grid snapping, and I'll just try and get this as close as I can to this player camera so that it is basically so that you can't see the difference between the two of them. They're basically exactly the same. And that's pretty close. I'm not really going to be able to get it much closer than that. The next thing we can do, I'll just double check that this sequence is ending at the right spot here. Very nice. This camera frame is actually, I think, if I zoom in on this, the camera frame is not exactly at the end here. So I'm just going to click on this keyframe, drag it over so that it is exactly on the end of the sequence there. Oh, this has actually moved the keyframe. and I didn't want to do that. I actually wanted this keyframe to be right where the curve, the blend-in curve starts. So I'm actually just going to select both of these keyframes, and I'll drag them back so that it is right where that blend begins right here. And I'll make sort of everything end right there, my animations for my character. And now we can see that come in. And it's actually doing a nice little zoom there, which was unintended. But if we pilot the camera again and have a look at how that looks, that's actually not bad. That was a bit of an accident there, that the camera sort of keyframed back a little bit and then glides in. But I actually think it looks pretty cool. I could just delete this keyframe to get rid of that, but I think that looks pretty cool. It'll be a nice smooth transition. Okay, so now that this is all set up, we just need to play this this level sequence and sort of stop input for our character while this level sequence is playing. So what I can do is save this sequence by clicking save here. You always want to save your sequence when you've done any good amount of work, because actually Sequencer can crash your editor sometimes if you're not careful. So it's always good practice to hit save all before you do anything with your sequence. And then I'm going to select the sequence in the level here. I am going to click up here and open level blueprint, and then I can right click and create a reference to that level sequence. Because I've got it selected here, I am able to right click and create a reference to it. I'll drag off of this and find play sequence player. I'll also grab the begin play node, event begin play, plug this in, and we also just want to disable input to our player while we're playing this sequence. So let's get player character, and we'll do a cast to third person character. We will disable input, and then we just need to delay for the exact duration of this sequence before we enable the input again. So we'll just grab a delay node, and we'll drag off of sequence player here and get duration. And then we can just plug that into the delay node like so. And then we can drag off of third person character here and enable input. And there are more advanced ways of doing this, such as converting the this element of the sequence to a spawnable object. But it's a little bit buggy in 5.5 has been my experience, and it's also just a bit more complicated to get working, whereas this, I've just kept it nice and simple for you guys, so this should be working now. So I'll hit compile and save, and if I full screen this, because also you'll notice the transition will be a bit sort of less smooth if you don't full screen it, I think because of the aspect ratio. So I will full screen this and I'll hit play, and you'll see our character will walk out and the sequence will come around as he does his little animation, and we will transition into gameplay and then be able to run around and play our game. But if you were watching carefully there, you may have noticed that my character glitched out a little bit as he walked out through this door, and that will just be because of the collision of this wall. I've just cut this hole out with a boolean using the modeling tool, and I didn't check the collision of this wall. So I'm just going to hit Control B to browse to it, and it will just be a matter of using complex collision on this. So if I search for complex collision, yep, that will be working nicely, but I just need to go down to the collision settings here and change the collision complexity to use complex collision as simple, and that should be working perfectly now. So let's have another look. Comes out nice and smooth, plays this cool little animation as we come around, and then we smoothly transition into gameplay. Nice, very cool. Guys, that's it. If this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.